testing purpose. And one more doubt you might be having. So if out of this 50, you are spending only for packaging, testing and development, what about the material cost, manufacturing cost if you ask? Actually, the material cost is almost zero. Why material cost is zero? You know, any IC could be manufactured, or the basic material for the IC is silicon, basic silicon. Actually speaking, the raw material silicon is almost free of cost. And that too, for a digital circuit, you could know the size of that IC is, say, it may not even be greater than 5 millimeter cross 5 millimeter. Or you take the latest processor, 8 core processor, 10 core processor, at the maximum, it might be in the size of a stamp. Now you could remember what is the cost involved or the resource material involved for that, right? So ultimately, silicon is almost free of cost. The cost is only the extracting the pure silicon. Of course, that also matters, but in a bulk, say you are printing some 1 lakh invitation, right? If you take 1 lakh invitation, the cost of one invitation paper cost will be almost zero. I believe the audio is clear. Do you have any problem with the audio?
No, sir, it is clear.
Okay, thank you. So that's why I didn't even take into account of the material cost. Now the real question is, do we need to spend 20 rupees for testing, or are we spending such a huge amount? In contrast, if you go for any analog IC, the scenario is still more like around say 30%, 30 to 40% will be for analog component, say PLL, or for an amplifier or an analog filter. That will consume the major cost. The remaining development cost, then testing cost. Again, the cost for digital circuit is almost zero, less than 5%. So that's the reason. If you go for getting any digital IC, it's almost cheap. The cost involves are only for packing, pin, and marketing. So package, the external pins, and marketing. But if you look at the components inside a digital IC, it's completely free. Okay, that's what I mean to say. So what we are concerned is this testing cost. Nearly it takes around 30 to 35% of the overall cost. So how do I reduce this? Now here only the question arises, do I need to really test it? Because I am going to spend such a huge amount on this, or roughly from 30 to 40% of my cost is being wasted only for testing. Do we essentially go for a testing? Now the question is, yes, there is no second thought in that. I am supposed to do the testing. Okay. I am speaking about the cost, but on the other end, there is an equivalent amount of complexity involved in testing a circuit. How do I say this? Because, say, let's assume I am taking an AND gate IC, right? Of course, you might be using that in your lab. So 8-pin IC, right? How do we usually test? The usual mechanism is you try to take this IC, 7400 IC, place it on a breadboard. Once you place it on a breadboard, what you essentially do, for an AND gate, A, B, and out, or Y. Let me keep it as Y. So A, B are my input, provided it is a 2-input AND gate, and Y is my output. So what do? I just go to the truth table of an AND gate, A, B, and Y. I try to feed in all the possible input combinations, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. Got it? I will be checking for the result. If it is an AND gate, 0, 0, 0, 1. So what I try to do, let these two be my input A and B, and this be my output Y. So what I'm trying to do, using some signal generator, I feed in the value of 0 and 1 for A and B, and I try to use an oscilloscope and check whether I am getting 0 and 1 in the output. Simple. This is the way to check my circuit. I give all these four patterns and try to prove that, okay, for all these four patterns, I am getting my output. So definitely this circuit is working fine. There won't be any problem. This is what we get it. Clear? But remember, this circuit is pretty simple circuit where the input pins are easily accessible to you. What I mean to say is, I can directly give input to A and B and directly measure my output from my output pin. Because all my input and output pins are being accessible to the user exactly without any complexity involved. Got it? So I can directly feed in the input to A and B, get my output. This is called as primary input, primary output. Now slightly I escalate this issues. What we try to do? Instead, let me make a simple. It is not going to be an AND gate alone. Rather, let me have a circuit something like this. Okay, this is my circuit. Let me keep it. Say for example. And this is being concealed inside a chip. You are not permitted to look in. Means you cannot. So, right? So let this be an IC where pin number A, B, C or something like this, and Y is my output pin. Now, the question is, I would like to check this particular circuit. How could I do that? Now really the difficulty enters in. Why? Because the input, out of two input of an OR gate, one input is not within my control, which means this output is not directly under my control. If I want to control this, I should control via this A and B. Whereas for this pin, yeah, C is under my control. So I can set here 0 or 1 via using this input pin C. Got my point? Now let's see. Say, if I want to test this, what am I supposed to do? Same procedure. Go for giving all possible combinations of two input and you are supposed to check this output. Another problem comes in. What is the another problem? If this pin would have been the output pin, I can directly tap this output and project that on a CRO. But what is the problem here? This is in the midst of multiple gates. So you cannot go there and tap it for the manufactured IC. So what's going to happen? What is the mechanism do I have to check it? Right? So I need to make sure, say suppose I am giving 1, 0 as an input to the OR gate. Let me assume. The answer is 1, but I need to make sure this 1 will be transferred to the output terminal without change in your input. I mean, without change in your output for this input combination. Could you observe what I'm trying to say? See, suppose this is my OR gate, right? So the previous case was simply something like this. There was no complexity involved. I feed in input A, B, check my output at Y. This is quite easy for me. Of course, this AND gate in turn has transistors, MOS transistor connected in a particular fashion to establish the functionality of AND gate. Let's not get into that. But as a black box model, what I mean to say is A and B are easily accessible, Y is also accessible. But that is not the case with this one. That's what I mean to say. A small OR gate sitting inside or at the midst of multiple gates surrounding it, it is not easy for me to test for the simple reason controlling this value here, right? To get 1 or 0, I need to give appropriately an input for this. So if I want to get 1 here, definitely the input pattern should be, can someone tell me? Either it could be 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0. I have 3 input combination to be given for this. Because if any of these 3 input combination is given to a NAND gate, you will definitely get a 1 over here. Got my point? So, which means I am trying to feed in this particular pattern. That's what I am supposed to do. For an OR gate, I am supposed to give all the 4 patterns and check whether you are getting this output. So if I give 1, 0, the output is 1. But remember, this 1 should be carried to the output terminal and projected without changing. Then alone I come to know, oh, I am getting 1 or 0 for the input combination which I have given. Now the question is, even if it is changing, that should be visible to me. That's again another question. So now, if at all, if I try to do that, let's assume this. This 1, definitely after an OR gate, it will become as 0. Let it be. But if I want to bring that same 0 outside, what would happen? In an AND gate, I need to keep this as 1. So definitely this is not at all possible. It is contradicting to the earlier case because here you have given 0, right? But the same line cannot be 1. So definitely you can't even feed this input combination because this circuit is called as redundant circuit. Not a reconvergent circuit. It is not redundant circuit. Reconvergent circuit. What do you mean by reconvergent circuit? Yeah, input branches out. One input passes through one of the gates. Another input comes and join at the other point. So normally testing this type of reconvergent circuit is always the toughest job. The point which I would like to project here is, we have seen the economy wise, testing a circuit is really tough. I mean, cost consuming. More than 40% of that cost is consumed during testing. Complexity involved is too heavy. How do I say too heavy? Because here I have taken just 4 gates. Right? Now, the scenario is, if you go for the latest processor which you use in your laptop or things like that, minimum 10 billion transistors, or at least 2 to 10 billion transistors will be used. Now you may think about what will be the complexity involved. Just handling 4 gate, I find such amount of difficulty. Billions and billions of transistors being packed inside that small area. I am supposed to ensure each and every line is fault free. Then you could understand what is the complexity involved in testing that particular processor. That's why I said, sometime, is it okay to go without testing? That is the terrible problem which you make. If you are planning based upon this problem, if you think that, oh, no, I cannot spend such a huge amount on testing and time, you just think about the time involved for testing. Simply, if you take a 50-pin IC, 50-pin means input-output pin, 50-pin IC, and if you want to thoroughly check, it will take 1500 years. With the latest test vector generation, high-speed test vector generation, applying that, and then testing all possible combination, it will take 1500 years. I'm not exaggerating. If you just open the book, the testing testing book, you could come across the same statement. Means what I'm saying, testing to make sure all possible combinations, right, is working fine. Now itself you could understand that complexity. For this gate, one single gate, to test a single option, I am finding this many challenges. Remember, I need to check all this for this gate. Similarly, you just think about having billions of transistors, billions of gates on either side. How difficult it is to set a value here, how difficult it is to observe the output at each and every internal nodes. This process, the difficulty in setting a value at an internal node is called as controllability. The difficulty in visualizing the output at an internal node is called as observability. Observability control. In fact, you need to, for testing a circuit, you need to measure the controllability and observability of that particular circuit. Okay. So you got it? So whenever you are testing a particular circuit, you need to make sure the controllability, observability is within the control, right? Then alone you can test that circuit. Otherwise, most of the time, it is difficult to test most of the circuits. So that's the reason I say the complexity involved in testing a circuit is really a toughest job. First of all, with respect to economy, complexity, time consuming, everything. Now, keeping this in view, can we conclude, oh no, we cannot test and we will launch a product in the market? Definitely, that will be the graveyard for that particular company. Say I'm purchasing a product and the product is not reliable, right? Then even if there exists a single complaint, right, you might have sold out billions of turnover, but a single complaint can tarnish the complete image picture of that particular company, semiconductor company, which means it is again very difficult to build up that confidence or the reliability. So definitely you cannot launch a product without testing. So testing is a necessary evil. You need to do that, but at the same time, I need to come up with different strategies, right, to make sure that testing is made with a reasonable amount, reasonable timing, reasonable economic involved in that. Because I cannot go and wait for 1500 years to make sure that the testing is right. That is how the whole testing concept comes into picture. Coming up with new strategies, algorithms to figure it out, how efficiently you can go for testing. At the same time, you can give higher coverage or yield. Right? Now let us. There is one more small difference between verification and testing. Verification and testing. Generally, at the outlook, both might look to be the same. So the verification and the testing please switch off your mic. Some people, okay, thank you. So this verification and testing, I request the participant to mute your mic.
Arif Muhammad, please Mute your mic. Just a minute, sir. I expel him.
Arif. Okay, thank you. Oh,
Just a minute, sir. Just a minute. Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. Actually, I do have sufficient noise on my background. I am sitting nearby a railway track, so every now and then you will be getting that railway track sound. Okay, anyway. Right, coming to this verification and testing, in which way this verification and testings are different? Quite simple. Say I would like to manufacture a product. Let it be something like, let's assume you are developing one processor for the latest mobile phone, including 5G, right? For 5G processing, you have made one processor that need to be tested and launched to the market. Now, how does this terminology differs? What do you mean by this verification and testing? Very simple. Any amount of functional verification and timing verification, functional and timing verification, which you make it before manufacturing. Simple. Right? So when I say verification, I write a code. Say for simple understanding, let me assume that I am writing a code for yes, a 4-bit ALU. So I will check two input A and B have been given. I will check if I give add as a control signal, the two inputs should be added and it should be given as my output. In case if I give multiply, those two should be multiplied and given as an output. A very simple processor, ALU, right? So I just check the functionality. If I give two input, whether that has been multiplied and it is being given as an output, the next thing I will be checking, is there any timing issue? Means I give my input and some other input has been multiplied and you are getting that output. There is a timing mismatch in the output. That also is a big problem. Timing refers to multiple things. Maybe that itself can be taken as a separate discussion. Static timing analysis, right? I think I have posted one YouTube also in the under my name on static timing analysis. If people interested might go through that. So taking a circuit and analyzing for the timing, that itself is a biggest job. Next, so checking these two is essentially a verification. Means you are verifying the perfectness of your design just one step before manufacturing. Then what is testing? After manufacturing, that's it. After manufacturing, now you might be having a question, why should I test after manufacturing? Already I have tested and verified everything is functionality is good. Then why am I testing after manufacturing it? Here comes the issue. Or this is where the real testing mean. When I say testing, it is not to test the validity of the design. It is to test the manufactured component, the healthiness of the manufactured component. Remember, the IC uses MOS transistor of 22 nanometer. You can just think about what should be the size of the device. 22 nanometer. Even less than that. Now, the latest processors are coming up with the 8, 9 nanometer technology, something like that, right? This 9 nanometer means you can't even imagine, right? Such a very, very small structure. Now, you just think billions of this transistor whose size are in the nanometric scale, 8 nanometer, 10 nanometer, 12 nanometer, and they have been connected, right? If they are being connected, you can just imagine the complexity involved, that there is every possibility that two lines may get shorted or a single line may be kept open. These are manufacturing defects are an 8 nanometer mass device or a MOSFET may get short in the oxide layer. So strictly speaking, when I say testing, I am actually looking for the manufacturing defect in it, in that particular IC, right? So on the whole, verification is the process which has been carried out before manufacturing. Testing is the process which has been carried out after manufacturing to find out, is there any short, is there any open, is there any short in the MOS device oxide layer, is there any other manufacturing defect in the manufactured copper. So the whole idea of testing is only to test, yes, very, very miniature size, only to test this manufacturing defect that has been taken place. Okay. So now you could differentiate what you mean by verification and what you mean by testing. Coming again, there is two more terminology. One you call it as a diagnosis, and other one, right? Detection, right? Detection. What is this? How are these two are different? When I say detection, right? It simply say I am keeping one IC, right? I am asking a detection network to check whether this IC is working or not working. So when I keep this IC and detect whether it is working or non-working, that's what you mean by detection. Means it will simply say, okay, it is working, it is in good condition, it is in bad condition. That's all, there ends. But when I go for diagnosis, it doesn't stop there. It doesn't give you a comment like good condition or bad condition. No, it not only says that, in addition, it goes to the next step, say, which part of your circuit has went wrong. That's what you call it as a diagnosis. Say if you go for doctor, the doctor diagnoses what is the problem with an internal organ. So actually the same type of scenario happens with the ICs also. You go for a diagnosis and then you find out which portion of my body, which portion of the circuit went wrong. Got it? Yes, simple. That's all. With this small idea, we will go ahead further. For most of my discussion, I am going to follow this Bushnell. This is generally called as Bible for testing, people used to say. Okay, all these stories and all, you can just go through that. I am just moving forward. There is a small difference again. Yeah. I think we have done that. Okay, and now two more terminology. Yield loss. Okay, what do you understand from this? Because this terminology is quite often being used. Yield loss. Actually speaking, all the IC, say suppose, let me consider 7400. I want to manufacture the same IC. So what actually happens is, you will be having a wafer, right? In this wafer, this will be of small pieces, rectangular pieces. They are called as chipset or a die. Chip, a single chip. Now, I can have this 7400, as many number of 7400 in the single die, single wafer, in the single wafer, right? Now, if I manufacture this, say, let me assume a wafer has some 50 chipset, 50 chipset, which mean out of this 50 chipset, actually I may be having around 30 to 35 chip alone will be a good one. The others will be bad. Means it is faulty. It's a faulty. So my yield is say 35 divided by 50. This is my yield. Generally, any Pakka design will land up with 60 to 65% yield. If you get 65% yield, that's a very good design and very good manufacturing. Because having such a good yield in an IC manufacturing is more welcome, right? Normally you don't have. The reason again being the nanometric scale. Since the devices, interconnections, wirings, everything are in the nanometric scale, generally you have the highest probability of the device entering into a faulty state. Right? Okay. Is that clear? That's all. So this is what you call it as a yield. But now let's try to understand what is this yield loss. Say this is my tester. It is going to test whether my IC is good or bad. Let me take this IC. I am having some 100 ICs, one followed by the other, like this continuously it is coming up. It's coming here, it is testing, it is segregating into two groups, good IC, bad IC, right? So first it is taking one and testing it, and it happened to understand that it is good, so it is supplying here. If the next one is bad, it is feeding to the bad. Now, based on the number of good IC only, I understand this much amount of yield I am getting. Now let's take a scenario like this. This IC is being fed into this tester. Actually, this IC is good. But what happened? Your testing mechanism has segregated that as bad. Now what happens? The testing strategies has segregated that as bad, but really it is good IC. Somehow based upon the testing mechanism or the algorithm which you follow, it has wrongly segregated that as a bad. This lead to yield loss. Means a good IC being classified under bad or a faulty one will lead to yield loss. It could be on the other way too. That is, a bad IC is being classified under good category. This is also much more dangerous. Yes, wrong decision. It's not only a decision making. Behind that, there are multiple things. Maybe I'm not getting into that. How come a good IC is being classified as a bad one? There is a chance. There are multiple chances in that. For that, you need to go still multiple level higher, right? Based upon the circuit nature, circuit behavior, it could be classified. A good circuit can be classified as a bad one. Got it? Right. So wherever you have some doubt, you can put it in the message so that then and there I could see a couple of questions coming up from your side. Okay. A bad one is being segregated as a good one. This is quite dangerous. In this case, it is a yield loss. Definitely it is a yield loss. You are going to lose it. But this case is quite more dangerous. Reason is you are segregating this bad that has been classified under good. Now, this will reduce your reliability. Substantially, reduction in reliability will lead to a huge loss. Say, you have one IC, and that IC has a bad IC, and it has been classified as good, and it has been employed in the biomedical equipment or space electronics equipment or avionics. Let's assume like that. You could imagine what would be the devastating effect on it. A bad IC sitting on an avionics, if that doesn't works while the flight is at the altitude of some 1,500, then definitely that is going to create a very huge impact. A life threat to around 200, 300 passengers. So when it come to life critical issue, they always have a redundant network. That's what you call it as a redundancy. So instead of one, they used to have, in spite of going through multiple checkings, right? That's how now you come up with built-in self-test, BIST, right? The system itself will check periodically, test itself and give the result. Oh, I am going to be faulty. I am going to be healthy. I am not going to be healthy. I am reliable. I am expected to die out. Like this notification in all latest equipment, you will get this notification by using the appropriate sensor network. Okay, coming back. So this reduces the reliability. That's it. Okay, now we understand what is this testing, what is the need for testing, how do we test it, what is the complexity involved in testing, all this. Okay, fine. Now your IC is ready. Let me assume that your IC is ready. Now, this IC, let me assume that it is a 1 billion transistor IC. 1 billion transistor IC. How am I going to test this? It has been manufactured and it came for testing. How am I going to test this IC? Very simple. What you try to do? Just now we have seen earlier. Then once you want to test anything, you give appropriate input patterns. That input patterns are called as test vectors. Test vectors. Give the test vector, get the output, observe this output. This is called response. So give the test vector, get the response, compare this response with the golden signature. What is this golden signature? Or good value. Say I know very well. Say suppose if it is an AND gate, 1 1 will give me 1. For all other cases, it is going to be 0. So you are having the result already here, right? So this result is nothing but expected result. Expected result. Now these two are compared. Then based upon this, if these two matches, yes, then the IC is good. If those doesn't matches, the IC is classified as bad. Simple. Right? So I am trying to take that IC, generate a test vector, or feeds the test vector, collect the response, compare that response, see whether it is same as what is expected. If it is so, you declare that as it's good, else you declare that as bad. So the block diagram level, it is okay if I say this, but reality is the challenge is really difficult. Say for example, in the test vector generation, let me have an AND gate, right? Five input, let me assume. How many test vector I need to give? 2 raised to the power 5. So 2 2s are 4, 4 2s are 8, 8 2s are 16, 16 2s are 32. How much it comes? The 5 only, correct. 4, 4 2s are 8, 16, 32. 32 test vector I am supposed to give. Now remember, still I am increasing. One more. If it goes to 6, 32 into 6. But 64. You keep on, you just see if the number of pin increases, my number of test vector generation increases drastically, exponentially. Are you following me? Just for a simple example, if the number of pin is 50, 2 raised to the power of 50, you just see what is the value of 2 raised to the power of 50. right? Just for your, just to have a simple calculation. Uh, 2 raised to the power of 50. This many test vector. Okay, let me assume I am taking 1 second, not even 1 second. 1 second is less. 2 second. Let me consider that 2 second or 5 second. Let me keep it 5 second for testing one test vector. Right? 5 second. This is the total amount of seconds required. Divide that by what? Divide that by 3600. Sorry, I have made it wrong. Sorry. No, what I was trying to get is this many test vector. If I assume that each and every test vector take 2 seconds for its execution, then that many number of seconds, you convert second to minutes, minutes to hours, hours to years, you could see what is the total amount of year. In that context only I said, in the initial discussion, it may run for 1,500 years. That's the point which I was trying to say. So really, it is not at all feasible. What I mean to say is, such a huge number of test vector, generating this, feeding that, getting the response, and then comparing, that's the reason it takes a long time. Then what is the way I can do it? Still, I need to test it. What mechanism should I follow to test this? The way is, do I have any sort of shortcut to test this IC, but at the same time, without losing the test coverage? By test coverage in the sense, finding out, checking all possible ways of the fault that could occur, and then verifying whether it is that fault exists or not. That's what you call it as a test coverage. When I say test coverage is 90%, which means 90% of the potential fault site has been tested. When I say test coverage is 95%, what I mean to say is 95% of the potential fault sites has been tested, and it gives me the test results also. That's what it means. Because always giving 100% accuracy not at all possible. You are expected to have here and there many places where you can't even imagine, right? Or if at all, if you are trying to go with that foolproof mechanism of testing, it cannot be done within that reasonable time. That's the reason you could understand, like somewhere some 15 years back, from the IBM, a processor was released in the market, and later on, after launching into the market, some 6 months after that, one of the user, they happen to realize that for a particular condition, this processor is not giving the good result, correct result. So that has been taken to the IBM research team, and later on, after verifying every cases raised by that particular user, the whole IC which has been launched in the market has been taken back. Remember what a huge amount of money would have been spent in doing this. So almost it leads to huge loss on that particular revenue of that particular company. If it is going to be a startup company, that's the biggest graveyard for that particular company. Fortunately, IBM is a well-established company, so it could manage such losses. So that's the reason I said testing is really a toughest job to carry out. Okay. Right. So now you have an IC. I need to test this. How should I test this? I develop something called as fault models. What is this fault models? Basically, by testing what we have seen in the earlier discussion is, testing is there to test what is happening during manufacturing or the manufacturing defect. When I say fault model, this basically takes into consideration of, say, a circuit being short. Short means what will happen? It will be connected to VDD line. So I can equate this short to SA1, means stuck at 1. Stuck at 1. Or what do I say is, this line is permanently being connected to 1. Provided this line has been shorted and connected to the line of VDD. Or a device has been shorted and connected to the line of VDD. Equivalently, there is on the other way too. A single line can be shorted to ground, which I call it a stuck at 0. Stuck at 0. It is permanently being connected to 0. That's what I mean to say. So any manufacturing fault can be equated to some kind of fault model, which I call it as stuck at models. That is stuck at 0 and stuck at 1. It could be on the other way also. It could be open also. Particular line can be open, which lead to stuck at 0 or stuck at 1. So any short, any open, or any sort of manufacturing defect could be equated to at a majority of fault which comes under stuck at fault. So most of the cases, you could equate all the fault to stuck at fault, stuck at 0, stuck at 1. So let's assume like something like this. So if this is my device, say it is my AND gate. Now, these two are my input line A, B, C. C is my output line. When I say, if the fault can occur, the fault can occur at A line, B line, C line. What sort of fault it can occur? A line can go to short or open, which may lead to stuck at 0, stuck at 1. B line can go to 0 or 1, that is open or short. So thereby it may lead to stuck at 0, stuck at 1. Similarly, this line can also lead to stuck at 0, stuck at 1. So any line can go with two type of fault, stuck at 0 and stuck at 1 fault. So based upon this, what we try to do, this fault model could be applied to all intermediate lines of that whole complex network and see, let's assume that, I will say, if this particular line is stuck at 0, say this is my AND gate, A, B, Y. If this line is stuck at 0, how can I test it? If I give the test vector 0, 0, will it test it? No, definitely it won't test. Why? 0, 0, it is expected to give 0. The output is 0. Even the stuck out result is also 0. If I give 0, 1, will it test it? No, it won't test it. If I give 1, 0, will it test it? No, it won't test it. When I give 1, 1, will it test it? Yes, it is expected to test it. Why? 1, 1 is expected to give a result of 1, whereas now, since this line is at fault, it will give me a stuck at 0, which means this line will give me 0. So when can I say that fault is testable? That is, the output of a function f of x is different from the faulty input. Say x is my input, right? X is my input, z is my function. When the faulty function and the original existing function, if both are different, then alone I can say that this fault has been detected. That's what happening. Look at here. If this is being stuck at 0, so you could expect that this line will be at permanently 0. Only if I give 1, 1, I am expecting 1, but you have a 0. There is a difference between these two results. That is, z of x is not equal to z f of x. So I can say that the fault has been detected. The test vector which is detecting the fault is 1, 1. Simple. This is the test vector for detecting this fault. Simple. This is a very simple circuit, one gate. I have generated the test vector. But remember about, say, I am having 25 gates. Generating this appropriate test vector itself is the biggest job. This is being done by certain algorithms, that is finding out appropriate test vector to detect a particular fault. That is called as ATPG, automatic test pattern generator. So for this, you have multiple algorithm like podium algorithm, D algorithm, like this, you have a long list of algorithm. The idea of that algorithm is generate appropriate test vectors. This algorithm, ATPG algorithm, should generate appropriate test vector, give it to design under test or circuit under test, CUT or DUT, to get the response. Got it? So you have an ATPG. This ATPG is expected to generate appropriate test vector to detect a particular fault, right, in the DUT, and then get the result, get the response, compare that response, and decide whether this is going to be correct or wrong. And still one more. In this case, we have considered, all the testing which have been considered with single fault at a time. Single fault. There are substantial evidence to demonstrate considering single fault and multiple fault, there is a slight change in the coverage, test result coverage. But remember, going for a multiple fault at a time will consume huge amount of power requirement, time requirement, and the variation in the coverage. Say suppose this coverage has 95%, this will have 95.3 or 95.5. Just for this 0.5 coverage, increase in 0.5 coverage, we are supposed to spend a huge amount of time and a huge amount of test power consumption. So generally, people will not consider going for a multiple fault at a time. Rather, all the testing has been done considering single fault at a time. Right? That's it. Now let's go back to this presentation. I have multiple thing. Maybe still I have 15 minutes. So I think let me stop this here and move to DFT. Let's see what is DFT. What does DFT speaks about? Meanwhile, if you have any doubt, you can post it. I'll be happy to take your queries. It is more like a monotonous, but we don't have any other option because I am having this 1.5 hour time only. Within that, I try to do the maximum justice. Some queries is there. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Now let's go for DFT. What is this DFT? Because most of the time you come across this keyword DFT techniques, DFT, what are they trying to say? DFT. This is nothing but design for testability. What is this idea? Design for testability. Simple. Now let's take like this. Okay. I have one adder. Right? These two are my input, A, B. Let this A and B, let it be 4-bit. You have sum and carry. So this will be 4-bit, this will be 1-bit carry. Simple. Suppose if I am intended to test this adder, what will I do? Strictly speaking, A is 4-bit, B is 4-bit. So for every input combination of A, that is 2 raised to the power 4, I need to combine with the 2 raised to the power of 4 from the B. So starting here from 0001, 0001 at the B. Like this, I need to check each and every possible combination. That's why I said it is a necessary devil. That's what I said. It's a monotonous job doing such a lengthy amount of computation. You can just imagine what amount of resources, power computation, resources, timing, power consumption is required. That's why you could see many research papers being published with the low power testing strategy, high speed testing strategies. You could see. Basically, strictly speaking, that is the only way I can ensure that this particular adder is good enough. Right? But now let us not think too much on that. For an assumption, let me take A to be some value, B to be some value. I will be getting sum and carry, and I will assure that, okay, fine, you get a proper sum and you get a carry. Simple. I give second set of data for A and B and check whether it is working. Like that, I may go up to some 5 data set for A and B and check whether my my output is right. Once I assure that the sum and carry is okay, I will say, okay, this adder is working. But slightly, I move to the next case. I have one adder. This adder is AB. But what happens? This output of an adder has been given to flip-flop. Say this is 2-bit. Let me assume that it is 2-bit, 2-bit. So the final result will be 3-bit, because if I add n plus n, the maximum number of bit for an adder will be 3-bit. So I am having a 3-bit flip-flop, D flip-flop. Now what I'm trying to do, take this flip-flop output and give it as an input here. That's it. Now you tell me, will I be able to do the same sort of strategy which I followed here? Can I apply it here? Definitely, it is not possible. Why? You look at the first case, it's a pure combinational circuit. What do I mean by that? The output depends only on my input. Whatever I give it here, based upon this only the output comes in. So very easily I can decide what should be my output based upon my input. Means I am well aware of what is there in my output, what is the expected output. Then I add two input. But coming to this sequential circuit, means where you have a flip-flop, you will not be able to say what is the output here until unless you know what is the input here. Because you know, in a sequential circuit, the output not only depends upon the present input, it also depends upon the previous output also. Are you following my network? I mean, following my point? So in a sequential circuit, you will never be able to decide what should be my sequence. Say you take it as a counter. You take a simple counter, right? If I say, how does the count counts? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. For every clock cycle, one count increases. So it goes to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, fine. Now simply I'm asking, hey, what is this count now? Next count, what is the count? If I ask, you immediately ask, okay, you tell me what is the present count and when does the clock signal come, then alone I will be able to tell you what is your next count value. Is that right? Because if the count is 7 and in the next clock cycle it will go to 8. In case the count is 5, in the next clock cycle it will go to 6. So you may not be able to tell what is your next result or next output until unless you know what was your previous output. That is the biggest problem. For adder, you will not ask, hey, add 3 plus 2 and give me what is the result. If I ask, hey, what was the previous input you have given to that adder? I will not ask. Because I know very well the output depends upon only the present input, 2 and 3. I will never think about what was your previous history, what was the thing which you have given earlier. No, I won't never go in that way. Now here comes the real challenge. Already this is a big headache. Means testing the combinational circuit is a big headache. Why? Having such a huge number of test inputs or number of pins, giving all possible combination. At least you come to know in this case, one of the consoling thing is you know the output. Now you have increased the complexity to the next level. What is that you are saying? Hey, I don't even know what was my previous output, but still can you test it? Now I need to think about different strategy. Means in a circuit, because you take any FSM, finite state machines, say it is a Mealy machine or it's a Moore machine, almost all practical circuit implementation involve at least a couple of FSM. Say it is a lift, say it is any sort of controller which you use in your day-to-day washing machine, starting from washing machine, fridge, AC, all those. Everywhere you have some FSM, a finite state machine. Now, if I want to test that, definitely, if I say FSM, it is going to have n number of flip-flops. If I say that it is going to have flip-flop, definitely the output of a flip-flop depends upon the previous output also. Now, the real challenge is testing this type of network. So, the complexity involved in testing sequential circuit is really high. That is, testing a sequential circuit is the toughest job compared to that of a combinational circuit. When I say combinational circuit, somehow I can generate the test vector and test it. But when I say sequential circuit, definitely I may not be able to do that. So if I want to make sequential circuit testable, the only thing which I need to do is make the output of the flip-flop that is in the feedback path as transparent. That is, if I know somehow, if I know what is this, the value fed in via this feedback, then then it becomes very easy because I know this value, then I can easily say this will be your next value in the next clock cycle. The only challenge is I don't know what was my feedback value. To do this only, I am converting all this flip-flop to what you call it as scan flip-flop. So when I want to test a circuit, right, that is particularly sequential circuit, wherever you have a flip-flop, convert this flip-flop to normal flip-flop to scan-based flip-flop. Means I can say I am having 5 flip-flops or 4 flip-flops or something like this. Flip-flop 1 count rise to flip-flop 4. 4 flip-flop. I can chain up them as scan chain. Scan chain. Now I can deliberately feed in the value 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1. Now I can feed a clock. Of course, all flip-flop has a clock, right? Now, if I am going to feed this value, I can very well say after the 4th clock cycle, what will be this value, what will be this value, what will be this value, what will be this value. And if at all, if this is going to be the feedback as an input, this is going to be as an input for the network, sequential network, then I can easily convert your sequential circuit to a combinational type of network so that the testing becomes easy. Because you know very well, in a sequential circuit, the topology is something like this. What is a sequential circuit? You have a combinational logic, combo logic, and you have a memory. This memory is nothing but a flip-flop. So you are taking in and giving this as an input. This is your primary input, primary output, and these are the feedback. Now, if it is a normal flip-flop, you don't know what are this value. If it is a scan-based flip-flop, if I convert this flip-flop to scan flip-flop, then I can easily know what are these values. Once I know these values, then this primary input I know very well. I can easily say what should be the expected output. So the conversion of the normal flip-flop to scan-based flip-flop to enable testing, they don't have any other job. Actually, with respect to functionality, the scan-based flip-flop has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with the scan-based flip-flop. Why then I convert this as a scan-based flip-flop? Only to facilitate the testing. So deliberately, I am adding some logics inside my circuit which is not contributing for the functionality of the circuit. They are facilitating the testing process. These type of techniques that is being followed are incorporated in my design only to ease the testing process. I call that as design for testability or DFT. Design for testability. In fact, in design for testability, actually speaking, it has multiple overhead. What overhead? You are going to add extra number of logic gates. So area overhead. If this logics which you are going to add is going to sit in the critical path, then it is going to increase my delay. So it is going to reduce my speed. Third, since I am going to increase the number of gates, not only it increase my area, it also increase my cost. Since I am adding extra logics, the reliability of that logic is also going to be questioned. because that also is subjected to fail. So the reliability is going to be pulled down. Okay. So all this can happen. But in spite of all this disadvantage, still I go for this DFT technique to ensure the testing is being done. That's what we see. So strictly if you ask, testing, yes, testing is actually going to consume me extra. But at the same time, I am not afford to launch a product in the market without testing it in a 360 degree. That's the reason we go. So the set of techniques which has been followed, right, mainly in a sequential circuit, replacing all the flip-flops by scan flip-flop, right? That technique is called as DFT technique, design for testability technique. So during the design itself, you are going to incorporate certain amount of logics inside my network, which will facilitate the easiness in testing the circuit. I'm stopping here. Maybe in tomorrow's discussion, we will see a few more on the DFT technique. And then I plan to go with the best built-in self-test. Probably tomorrow's session, we will discuss built-in self-test. And there is one tool called TestCent. If possible, I will also show some of the simulation in that so that you can just go through that. So that's from my side. If you have some queries, I will be happy to take up the queries. So strength is great, 108. Yeah, I am stopping my sharing. Yes, please. Yes, if you have, you can even unmute and speak.
If you have any queries, you can raise it.
Dead silent. Okay.
Ashwati ma'am, are you having any question? Ashwati ma'am, I think she's asking question, but it's not audible. I think. Ma'am, you can post the question in the chat box, or unknowingly your mic is unmuted. Okay, there is no more queries.
Oh, great. So I don't know whether you understood completely or you didn't understand anything or you don't want to ask that question. That's fine. Thank you so much. Really, it's a great pleasure meeting you all. And I thank all the people for taking such a great effort. For the complete team of Dr. Ilangovan and his team, I would like to thank the principal head of the department, the participants who are patient enough. I could see many doctorates in this. I know how tough it is to sit for 1.5 hours. Sorry to bother you for that long time. I didn't even take a break. My mail ID, I can just keep it here so that maybe in tomorrow's class also we have it. Even if you RSAKTHIVEL at vit.ac.in. This is my mobile number is 9994627570. Okay, so you can just put a query in case if there is any collaborative research works or paperwork that could be carried out also. Oh, chat box should I? Okay. 9994627570. That's my number. And rsakt@vit.ac.in. Okay, fine. So that's That's my mail ID. Fine, thank you so much, and we will meet tomorrow. Possibly, if you have any doubt, you can just discuss. And again, off the line, we can also see if there is any collaborative works that could be carried out. Maybe it could be a project, or it could be some sort of publication type of thing. I work with now. I mean, I'm working with some sort of neuron modeling, and a couple of my students are working with this area only, neuromorphic computing, and of course, all areas of VLSI, high-speed architectures, low-power architectures, high-speed architectures for image processing, sometimes cryptography even, but not much for that. And now we are focusing more on coming up with the hardware accelerators, papers on this area. So someone who would like to work in this VLSI domain, architectures domain, maybe we can collaborate later on. Okay, thank you so much. Meeting you by online. Dr. Ilangon, sir.
Sir, thank you so much, sir, for your valuable
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you so much, sir. Again, we'll meet you, sir, tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. I am
Yeah,
leaving
thank you,
the meeting. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Dear participants, I have shared the HSpice detail, HSpice manual in our mail. If you have any queries, you can ask, or we will wind up the session now. Again, we'll meet by 11:30. Yeah, thank you.